Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our February Teaching and Learning for Student Success monthly webinar series. Sybil has shared a copy of a multicultural literature syllabus with us, which you all can access in the handouts section of the webinar. So if you'd like to refer to that and check out her readings, and she'll be referring to it during her talk today as well. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today, Syble Davis. Sybil Smith Davis was born and raised in Palestine, Texas, a small East Texas town. After graduating from Palestine High School, she moved to Houston to attend Texas Southern University. Her initial major was criminal justice. Although she found the coursework of criminal justice dull and boring, she enjoyed all of her English courses. She began to explore and read stories she had never really heard, especially from Black culture. Getting more acclimated in the culture was eye-opening, so she began emulating the stories she read by writing her essays for English through made-up personal sagas. Apparently, they were more than just good stories because her English professor, Dr. E. Brown, thought them to be true. Once she realized they were not, she encouraged Sybil to change her major to English. Sybil then graduated from TSU with a bachelor's and a master's in English. She was hired at Houston Community College in August 1990. Going on 27 years, Sybil has served as a faculty member teaching developmental English, composition, multicultural literature, women in literature, and fiction. She has also served as assistant chair of the English department at the Central Campus, as dual credit liaison, as program committee chair for developmental English, as a scholarship chairperson for the Black History Scholarship Gala, as an SGA faculty sponsor, as executive member of the College Activities Board, and as division chair for English, Developmental English, Humanities, and the Egalitarian newspaper at Central Campus. She is currently associate chair of the English department at Houston Community College system-wide. And without further ado, here is Sybil Davis speaking on developing an appreciation for multicultural literature, a personal journey. And I turn it over to you, Sybil.
Thank you, Lydia. I appreciate it. Um, I started teaching early as a 23-year-old, coming from a small town where it was only basically like a black and white town. I can remember when the first Mexican American family moved, Mary Aguirre and her family moved, and for some odd reason, Mary navigated to me because I think she thought that I was Hispanic or Mexican, as she was. I didn't know how to speak Spanish, but she taught me, and I would ask her to come to my house. She asked me to go to her house. There was her house is the first place that I had real authentic Mexican tacos. Enchiladas, I had never even thought of these words, not even read about them in Palestine, Texas, you know, being just like a black and white town. The spices were good. The food was good. Just learning the customs of being a Hispanic person was great to me. Not only did I go to her house, but she came to my house and she felt the same way. Mary and I became very close, very tight. And it went with me so far, even when I graduated from high school, that once I changed my major from criminal justice to English, I needed a minor, and I minored in Spanish. Whereas when I graduated from Texas Southern with a BA, I taught first I didn't have a job at first. I was a receptionist for a podiatrist, which was dull, making $5 an hour. And then I went on to become Mickey Leland's, I'm sure some of you've heard of Mickey Leland, he's passed on, in his person to help people get out to vote for Michael Dukakis. And I had a group of individuals who were, they weren't volunteers because we did make money. So I did gather a lot of of college students, and I was kind of like their first supervisor, if you will, doing this kind of work. And after November 8th of that year, when Dukakis lost, it was like, what am I going to do with my life? And there is when Mr. Leland connected me with Rod Page, who became the Secretary of State, I'm sorry, Secretary of Education during the first Bush years. And he is the one who connected me with Houston Independent School District, where I became a permanent substitute for Lee High School. Um, Being at Lee, I started teaching because one of the full-time instructors had to leave, who happened to be a Jamaican, Mr. Karanja. His mom had passed away, and he said he needed someone to teach the class. And the principal said, "Well, don't you have an English degree?" Because this was an English class. And I said, "Yes." Not only he's and with that, I had to show all my credentials, of course, to her. And she also saw that I had a Spanish minor, and there was also an instructor who was the swim lady who had to go out on maternity leave, and she was not only the swim uh, coach, but was also the Spanish teacher, which she's taught beginner Spanish. Hence my life as an English and Spanish individual, because I did start teaching beginner Spanish, learning the ways, remembering what Mary Aguirre and her family had taught me to be able to handle the students that were taking Spanish. And it was a population of Spanish students along with Black students, teaching them the ways of each other on my own accord, which it was fun. So that kind of got me into multiculturalism, if you will. Once I got done with that, I graduated with my master's degree, only to come to Houston Community College, being the first, well, one of the youngest English persons hired at a full time here. And that was in 90. And in 93, 92, I asked if I could teach a, an African American literature class, and they told me to write a proposal for it. And it was immediately turned down from the program directors and so forth. But I had someone, Martha Weathers and Linda Daigle, who were like mentors to me at that time, and they both encouraged me, and Ira Cranon, who he's passed on now, who's also African American male, to why don't we develop a multicultural literature class. Whereas I was being able to go on my first real conference and learned and sat around the likes of people like Sonia Sanchez, uh, not only just Sonia Sanchez, but Mari Evans, various Margaret Walker and Alexander. These were very great people, Margaret Durrows and stuff. And I talked to them about what had happened, and they too helped me me and Ira, not just me, but Ira Cranon also developed this kind of curriculum about multiculturalism. And that's when I started picking up books about things. And I kind of focused my multiculturalism on African American literature and Mexican American literature. And I found that doing this, that was accepted at HCC, and therefore the first multicultural literature class came into fruition, I think, in 1995. But from teaching this multicultural it encourages and appreciation, and it allows the individuals to learn and to know that beliefs, values, and histories, customs, language, and even the food of others is just as important as theirs. And it took a lot of honing to do this, which was okay. It was fine, just learning, reading, and understanding other cultures. Um, as the years passed on, I took a, a thing with biracialism, simply because I'm biracial, and I started having my students to talk about dating different people, and the class was always a full class. As a matter of fact, we always had to shut it down. It was full by by the 20 minutes, once it was done, once it got out there to people knowing what was being taught there. And it's just been great. It improves the self concept, of individuals. Most students come in talking and appreciating who they are not necessarily appreciating it at first, being shy. I don't want to say ashamed of it, because it was never shame there, but it was maybe shy of delivering who they were, or what their customs were, what their culture was. And the only thing that I had to get uh, into the students' mindset was culture had nothing really to do with the color of their skin. And some routes it did, even within their own ethnicities or whatever, but culture dealt with, their beliefs. I would give examples of how many people are Catholic, and of course there would be an array of hands, which would be black, white, uh, even Asian, Hispanic, of course. And then some of those didn't raise their hand. I would say, well, what are you? And they would say, oh, I'm Buddha, or I'm, I don't believe, or whatever. And it just became a fun class, and it still is a fun class, actually. But I love teaching it, and we come up with something different all the time. But one thing that really, really sticks to me, that I have noticed that I do when I do teach it, that I teach each time, and that is To Kill a Mockingbird. Um, I like To Kill a Mockingbird because it actually shows, and it's not a black and white thing, but it shows a plethora of how various people are in society, such as you have a single parent. You know how cultures change. You have a single parent household, and it's not a mother who's a single parent. And this was taking place, according to Harper Lee, in 32 in Alabama, but it was a man who was very principled. Atticus was. There was also a racist individual who we thought was racist, but Mr. Du Bois was not racist. So once you read the story and got the gist of what Harper Lee was doing, she was showing how many people are different and their culture is different, no matter where they live, even if they all can say they're Alabamians or Macomb, people from Macomb, but they all had a different culture, be it custom, be it the food they ate, where the kids did go to Calpurnia's house to eat, to learn about her church, her beliefs, and so forth. Learn that their father didn't like the fact of having guns. It's just really good. And that book sets the stage, or sets not only the stage, but the standards of, I think, what multiculturalism really is. Even though students come into the classroom saying that, I read that in high school, but once they read it again in college in a multicultural academic setting, they feel differently about themselves, about the book, and usually about the world around them. And that's that. Hello?
Excellent. Yes, thank you so much. Sorry, I had muted myself. Sybil, I wondered if you would speak to, and I'm going to start going through the images that you sent, but what you were thinking about with, the relationship between skin color and culture, and how Barbie factored into your understanding of that.
Okay, good question. I like that question. Um, as an adult, well, as a child, let me go back. As a child, I didn't care for big dolls. Big dolls scared me because they were so lifelike. Their hair, you could throw them down, and their eyes would just look at you, or something. And I took an affinity to Barbie because she was feminine looking, girl like. And there were a lot of Barbies, by the time I got them. At first, initially there were only 2 or 4 Barbies, Barbie with the different thing. But as I grew up, we got Mod Hair Ken, we got Malibu Barbie, we got Twiggy, we even got Diane Carroll as Julia, which was the nurse Barbie. And Barbie also came in packages, like she was maybe the airline stewardess. And I say stewardess because back then it was stewardess. And I was like, oh, I want the airline stewardess Barbie. I want the Malibu Barbie because she always looked like she was on vacation or something. She got suntan and all of that stuff. And Ken, his hair was mod hair. Either he was the blonde hair, hard hair Ken. There was a black Ken doll who was Brad, and then of course there was G.I. Joe, who was, another sec. He was like, he's an army guy, and stuff. So I started using Barbie and her friends as my tools for becoming an adult. Because I like to entertain, I love entertaining, and the Barbie doll gave me that imagination to pretend and creativity of who I wanted to be as an adult or what I wanted to do. And I used them as models and tools to play out adult things. Oh, Barbie's having a party. I had all of the accessories for Barbie to make her have a party, to invite all of the friends. And even though their names were, the Barbie was on the packet, but I gave them names. I gave them my names. Sometimes I would be the Barbie with the long blonde hair, sit suntan. Sometimes I would be Julia. Sometimes I would be Twiggy, or whomever it was. But I got to utilize these dolls to be people who I surrounded myself with, which as I grew up, I wanted to be a professional person. I became professional. I became a professor, if you will. I have my cousin who is a businesswoman. I have a friend, Barbara. I see her up now. She's a nurse, which was emulated like the Julia doll, And then I have other friends who are flight attendants, and we do travel all the time. And I just I had this crazy boy cousin who didn't play with the Barbie dolls, but he did play with GI Joe, and he would make GI Joe interlope into Ken and Barbie's world. He was this new jet, this new guy, this rugged guy that came into town and intimidated Ken, and I just played him out just like adults did, and I see myself now as not playing out, but actually living the real roles of the way in which I played with Barbie, and not that I did what I did as a child that it has come to pass now, but if you see the one with Denise, my cousin Denise. On there, how she has the Louis Vuitton bag and she just looks like she's a jet setter. That's my cousin. She actually is like that, not just her, my cousin, but there are other women like that who live like that, who jet set. My son, this doll particular, which is actually Brad, I believe it is. It's not Chance, of course, but I mean, Chance is pretty clean cut like this now. Um, the one that looks like my daughter, it actually looks like her. That's how I see Charity. And I had no idea that she would grow up. I would have a daughter to look like this or act like this. But, I think those dolls help me. And not only that, if you see there's a plethora of color here, they're all, look like they have different attitudes or different ways of life. And I like that. And when you saw the first part of the multicultural, my multicultural friends, it's because I do have multicultural friends. I do think that I'm a fashion icon. I have an array of friends that look like those dolls, not just friends, but colleagues, people that I hang out with, that I spend a great deal of my days with and see them, and they remind me of these individuals, not the way that they are, but just the look, because we are all different. We all have different journeys to go through and just different talks, different ways of living. And Barbie was so profound to me, and I was able to see my life as a child as I am becoming a more, wisdom bound adult. I don't want to say older, but
Yeah, I just find that so interesting too because, I mean, I think a lot of times when people think of Barbie, it's like this stereotype or this image of one thing. And when I think of Barbie, I think about Sandra Cisneros' short story Barbie Q, which is in Woman Hollering Creek and Other
Yeah,
Stories.
absolutely.
And I think that, part of what she points out there is that for whatever we think as feminists and as critics, as cultural critics of Barbie, they do have this influence and this sort of cultural capital for young people, right? And not just young girls, but for young people in general. And what I find so fascinating is that, you mentioned you're biracial, but I happen to know that you're actually multiracial, right? And so growing
That's true.
up with a Choctaw grandmother, and like you said, you're, living in a very multicultural um, community,
Right.
or increasingly multicultural community in East Texas, which is probably not what a lot of people think about when they think of deep East Texas. For a lot of people, it's just black and white.
Absolutely.
Um, and so I think it's really fascinating that you were able to find in, this toy, in this doll, a representation of what you experienced in your world growing up, and then that also translated into ultimately in your profession to
Yeah,
teaching multicultural literature.
absolutely.
Hi, I
Abs-
had a question. I really like, actually, a comment and a question. I really like the way that you used To Kill a Mockingbird
mhm.
to exemplify how someone that was perceived to be racist was actually not racist. And given the times and the sentiment in the country with regards to people feeling not included, or people not wanting them to be part of the society, I think that it's a good book to probably read that can help people sort those thoughts out. But I also noticed in the syllabi that you had a section on religion and
Mhm.
belief, and obviously, that's also an issue that's very pertinent right now in the
Yeah,
media.
right now it's getting.
I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about what you do with that subject in your classroom.
Okay, because I really should spend more time on it, but sometimes religion gets a little hectic in the classroom when people start talking about their beliefs. One thing that happened to me when I was at Texas Southern, and I think I was like 17, matter of fact, I know I was 17 years old or 18, and I was taking my first psychology class, and there was an African guy. His name was Dan. Well, we called him Dan, and we were talking. I don't know how. I can't remember exactly what brought the subject on, but it was a discussion in class. And Dr. Eaton, the teacher, well, the professor, she would say, "Well, what religion?" And different people were saying, "Well, God does this and God that, how people, they were about people's feelings and so forth." And so she said, "Well, yeah, but what about people who don't believe in God?" And being 17, 18, coming from Palestine, Texas, which religion was a factor there, that guy, Dan, he says, "I don't believe in God." And if you could have seen the 17 and 18-year-olds scrambling to get away from him, thinking that our belief system was we're going to get, he's going to be struck down. We don't want to get struck along with him. And that teacher brought it to our attention to, quit being silly, quit being crazy. There are people in other parts of the world who don't, believe in God or have other beliefs and religious factors or none whatsoever. So that was my first initial thing about religion. And then when I started trying to incorporate it into the class, it would get sometimes some heated argument. And I know some people, because the community college is an audience of individuals who are from ages 17, 16, well, now 16 up until 62 or better. And you have people who have just believed in God, or voodoo or whatever it is, and they're very sensitive. So I try to bring it in with more of not necessarily religion, but more of a belief system. And I would ask them how many people believe in dreams. Do you know anything about of being born with a veil over your face, and trying to introduce them to that. And some people understood what I was talking about, and some didn't. And then I said, what about soothsayers or palm readers? And then people would start talking about their culture. Well, my parent, I have an aunt that went to Louisiana to get a root put on a man, or something like that. So it becomes that type of believing, as opposed to religion, excuse me. And then that's when I brought in the movie Eve's Bayou, which talks about culture. It's culture based. It talks about this young girl having a vision or having powers because her aunt has powers, and her great great grandmother Eve had powers, who married Jean Paul Baptiste back in Louisiana times in the 1800s, and freed all, and she had bore. Um, 12 kids for him, and there was this string of Baptistes all over the state of Louisiana, talking about their beliefs and what they value, what the family value, what was. So I kind of take it on that in that way. And then you have students who come in with, they may not believe in voodoo or hoodoo or anything, but they have Buddha, as a part of their sect, and they, enlighten the class through what their beliefs are, or their values, or what their traditions are in regards to celebrating something or not celebrating. And then you have people who, you know, like, again, the various celebratory things come in, and we start learning about um, how people take this belief, and introduce it to others, so they would at least understand and not be so judgmental about it. So that's why Eve's Bayou, I think it gives the students that opportunity to see various perspectives, even though it's talking about the beliefs of voodoo, but it also brings in dreams, or just, like I said, um, they're not always, well, palm readers, I guess is what you call tarot cards, and the like, trying to make someone do something that they don't want them to do. And other people, and then different people bring in on how, what's the Mexican? It's Santeria. That we've started comparing what's the like of. It's just called a different name. So that's why I use the belief systems more so than religions, I guess it would be.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
Hmm.
All right, so we can go ahead and open up for general questions now. If anyone has a question, you can either just raise your hand or send me the question using the questions pane, and I will unmute you so that you can ask Sybil your question yourself. And I actually had a question. I thought it was interesting about how you were sort of providing the history of the development of your multicultural literature class. Um, And I actually have two questions for you. One of the big aspects of the Dreamcatchers program is mentoring. And you had mentioned that Martha Weathers and Linda Daigle were two mentors for you when you were a young faculty member. Kind of what role did they play as mentors, and how did that impact you coming up? And then I was also curious about you said your proposal for the African American literature class was rejected, but that the multicultural literature class was accepted, and I was curious why you think that is.
Well, starting with the mentoring with Martha and Linda, I think because I was, like I said, I was 23 years old, and I just thought, God, being an English instructor, but my mindset was I was this professor, and they both guided me. It was, I don't, to be honest with you, Lydia, we never said the word mentor at all. I don't recall them saying, I want to mentor you. That wasn't anything. But Martha would say, I'm just going, I'm going to guide you. I see your potential. I see what you want. You're on fire with wanting to please these students. And I did. She did see that because I was like 5 years their senior, and I wanted to be this impressionable person. And she helped me. And she says, was telling me the do's and don'ts, in regards to students. And I took that. And not only that, but Linda Daigle also was there. And she would tell, because she said too that she was young at one time and she knew exactly, they were able to, I guess, see that they had once been in my shoes. I'll put it like that. I won't say my skin, as Atticus French says, he says you have to walk around in someone's skin. And that's one profound thing that I like about that book when Dr. Chavez brought that up, because I think that's most important, because shoes you can pull off and put back on, but skin, that's a whole different ballgame. So they allowed me they saw what it was like being young and wanting to do well. So they took me by the hand and helped, and they guided me in the right directions. Matter of fact, I think I got a lot of my leadership skills, some of them from Martha Weathers and Linda Daigle, because both of them were at once chair as I was. Now, in regards to the proposal, well, when I got to when I got to HCC was not peppered with a lot of diversity in regards to the classroom. However, I thought that there was a need of an African American literature class, because I was stationed here at Central, which is the hub, or the flagship part of HCC, which was founded by, not founded, but the first president here was Judon Boney Sr., who happens to be African American. And the population here was mostly black students, if you will. And one time a student did ask me, why we gotta always read this stuff about white people? Why we can't read about our own stuff? And it kind of stuck with me, that kind of pinched me. And I said, you know what, you're right. And I started, the book that we use, I can't remember the book that we had, but there was seldom, stories from blacks or anybody ethnic, if you will. They were like, and they were professional stories because they were in a book, but they weren't necessarily people that I even knew. I was reading the book like they were novels to me because I hadn't read them. If I had read some of these stories, and it didn't mirror who they were. So I just felt and plus, not only that, I would sometimes talk about, uh, they would ask me what was my major. And at that time, like I said, my major was English and Spanish minor in undergrad, but my grad master's was English, of course, with literature with a concentration in the Harlem Renaissance, and that's hence the Harlem Renaissance Barbie on the screen. So I guess they felt once because we were a small unit in the 90s, early 90s, it wasn't as many professors or instructors as we have now, because that was 27 years ago, or 25 at least, in trying to do this. And the division didn't see a need for it. But like I said, Linda and Martha Weathers was really somebody, and she didn't want to see me shot down with it. So she and Linda helped me and Ira Cranon come up with this new term, which it wasn't a new term, but it was the buzzword, multiculturalism, diversity, and stuff like that. So Linda was actually the leader of the team, but Ira and I actually did a lot of the work, you know. So
It,
I guess that's why they didn't. there was no interest in it at all. I guess that's the
Yeah.
only answer I would have, because they just didn't feel that it was relevant, I guess.
Hmm. It's interesting to me that you ended up teaching pretty much the same thing,
Mm,
um, but that just putting a different name on it makes it more palatable.
absolutely, absolutely. And
Okay.
I think when individuals do teach it now in the 2000s, that they do put their own spin on it, their own
Hmm.
ethnicity. Claire Kagayama, who, of course, was one of our dear faculty members who passed on, she garnered her multicultural lit class more of a Japanese stance because she was Japanese
Hmm.
and stuff. So I think that's what and a lot of individuals started doing once they did get that as a section.
Hmm. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Dr. Chavez, did you have any other questions for Sybil?
No, I think that covered it. If there are any, list of books or anything that you may want to share with us later, we can always use those and we can share them with the group. But thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank
Okay.
you so much, and thanks for including and having me. I've really enjoyed it. I wish we could talk forever. But before I leave, when you asked about a book, one other book that I do use in multicultural lit that I don't use as often as I do To Kill a Mockingbird is The Wedding by Dorothy West. And the reason why I choose it is because Dorothy West, who was the last of the Mohicans of the Harlem Renaissance, she's the last one that passed on in '94. And Jackie Kennedy Onassis is the one who encouraged her to complete this book that she had been writing since then. And but anyway, it's about when she's referring to the characters in the book, she never calls them black, white, Hispanic, or anything like that. She calls them like mocha, saffron, chocolate, man, all of these things. And once when I do utilize that book in the classroom, students love it because their imagination is everywhere. It doesn't become, it just becomes a colorful book to them.
Hmm.
And I think that's great.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sybil. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all
Yay.
again. I thank you all for including me.
Thank you.
Absolutely.